go ahead and verify this trigonometric identity. So 1 minus the quantity sine squared of theta all over 1 minus cosine is equal to negative cosine. All right, let's see how crusty this guy is. Okay, so we have 1 minus this guy over here. So it seems to me that we can just go ahead and maybe subtract these two. I mean, like, go ahead and get a common denominator. So if I put this into 1 right here, I can multiply this side top and bottom by 1 minus cosine of x. So it's kind of hard for me to squeeze it in here, so I'll kind of show that right here. So I'm going to multiply by 1 minus cosine of x. I'm going to multiply that top and bottom. Okay, and so here's that 1, and then minus, we still have our sine squared of theta. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to use theta here. Theta, and that's all over 1 minus cosine theta. Okay, so if I multiply this through, 1 minus cosine of theta times 1 is just itself, right? So I'm just going to write that in right there. So 1 minus cosine of theta minus sine of square theta, and that's all over my common denominator of 1 minus cosine of theta. Okay, so if we look here, I see a sine squared and a 1. So that looks very common, very familiar from our Pythagorean identity. So let me just write that again right here. So really what I'm going to do right here, this is kind of like side work. It's not really part of the problem, but just so that we can rewrite something within our function here. So check this out. So let me just write the identity down. Okay, so we know that this is our Pythagorean identity. Now if I subtract sine squared to both sides, notice here, 1 minus sine squared of theta is cosine squared theta. So 1 minus sine squared of theta is going to be cosine squared theta. So in order for you to see it, I'm just going to rewrite this as negative cosine of theta plus 1 minus sine squared theta. All I did was I just reversed these. I put the 1 right here and the cosine over here. So I just switched them around just so that you can see this clearly what I'm trying to show you here. So 1 minus sine squared, look right here, 1 minus sine squared is cosine squared. So I can replace this whole thing with cosine squared theta. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to replace this whole thing with cosine squared theta. So negative cosine theta plus cosine squared theta all over 1 minus cosine of theta. Now let me just go back up here, since now, I mean, we've been going now for a little bit. We're trying to make this equal to negative cosine. Okay, so we're not done yet, just that's where we're trying to get to. Now, if we look at the numerator, negative cosine theta plus cosine squared theta, they both have a common factor of cosine theta. So I'm going to factor out a cosine theta. So I'm going to factor out a cosine theta. So that's going to be negative 1 plus cosine theta all over 1 minus cosine theta. Oh, check this out. So these are almost the same. But this is a negative one, and that's a positive one. That's a positive cosine. That's a negative cosine. So if you ever had that case, then that means you have to factor out a negative 1. So I'm going to factor out actually a negative cosine theta, which means that this now becomes a positive 1, and that becomes a negative cosine. So positive 1 minus cosine theta, and that's all over 1 minus cosine theta. And now look, those cross out, and we get a negative cosine of theta. And check this out. We'll come back over here, and that whole thing does equal cosine of theta.